Well, hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Out and About with our program director. And that's me, Erica Narducci. I'm the program director at Cancer Support Community Delaware. Oh, sorry. Sorry, had a little feedback there. You gotta love technology. It always surprises us. So because we're not fully back into person programming in person in our offices, I started this video podcast every month to bring you relevant topics by interviewing interesting people in our community. People you might not be aware of because you're not out and about as much yourself. So today we have episode 18, Saving White Clay Creek. And with me, I have Jan Owens. Jan, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for asking me, Erica.
Jan has been a participant at our Newcastle County office for many years. She's a cancer survivor. So Jan, let's start just by telling us a little bit about your cancer diagnosis and how you found Cancer Support Community Delaware.
Well, I was diagnosed with follicular lymphoma, the cancer with too many syllables, back in 2010, and received a kind of chemo called R-CHOP for 2.5 years. And then I was diagnosed again. It came back in 2013, and I had a kind of chemo called Trianda and rituximab. And I've been, since that ended, I think, in 2015, and I've been cancer-free since then. And I'm very grateful for the cancer support community. And the part that I've been most active in is poetry with Maggie Rowe, and I just love it. And we have a very small community of people who show up for the poetry group on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. And we've really supported each other and, ask each other questions and given each other ideas about everything in our life, not just cancer, but starting with cancer. And it's really been a key support for me.
Great. So you answered my next question a little bit already, which is how is the poetry class helpful for you? I love that it's a community. Inside our community, it's a community. So what else has been helpful with that? And were you a writer before you went to the poetry group?
I had been aspiring to be a writer and had started a book called The History of the White Clay Creek. I don't know if I can get that.
I'll hold mine up so you can see.
Oh, okay. You can see that better. The History of the White Clay Creek. And I'd started that in the early 90s, interviewing people for it. And it had a lot of fits and starts while I had cancer and while my children were getting married and starting their lives. But I finally just finished it and got started publishing it this May.
So before we talk more about the book, which I'm very excited you're here to talk to us about, can you tell those who are listening where the White Clay Creek is located in Delaware?
Erica, I've lost your audio.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay. So where is White Clay Creek located, and how did it become a special place for you? Oh, Jan, we can't hear you. Hold on, Jan, we can't hear you. There, can you, no.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there, I hear you now. I don't know what you did.
Is this good?
You're good, yeah.
Okay, I'll try to talk fast while you can hear me. There was a time in my life, first of all, White Clay Creek is located up 896 in the northwest part of Delaware. And I got interested because there was a time in my life when I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. And since then I found several more nickels, so not to worry. But at that time, I didn't have the fees to support, going to restaurants or going to theaters or going any place with an admission fee, except for the White Clay Creek, which accepted me with no admission fee and gave me so much more in terms of nurture. And there's actually a lot of research, and Erica has said that she would post the link in the chat on Facebook page after this interview. there's a lot of research that says that, it's actually healthy for you to be out in nature. It will lower your blood pressure, it'll lower your stress hormones. And I personally can't wait to get out on the White Clay Creek and go hiking right after this.
Great. So were these experiences what inspired you to write about the history of White Clay Creek, and kind of what made you decide to embark on this adventure?
Well, it was such a remarkable, in those days, the early 90s, there was Creek Road and there weren't a lot of trails. You basically had to go bushwhacking through the wilderness in those days. And
Mm.
very seldom did you see anybody else. But there was a lot of wildlife and, nature and the beauty of the White Clay Creek. And I started asking people, how did this come about? There's this big swath of wilderness, right in our midst. And most people knew nothing. They said they had no idea. But the people who did kept mentioning the same three names: Don Sharp, Dorothy Miller, and Dick Robinson. And it was such an unusual story and such a huge swath of land that I decided to start interviewing them. And that was the basis for this book, because it was a story that I felt had to be out there, known. Very few people
Great.
know and understand that the first parcel was purchased by the state of Delaware in 1968. That was the Smith Farm. And that is the farm, if you go to the summer concerts at what we call Carpenter Park today, that land was the first parcel of upwards of 50 parcels that have been purchased over the years. Each one was a separate fight with bumper stickers and petitions and buttons and calls to legislators and letters written to the newspapers and so forth. All this, most of it was done prior to on the other side of the digital divide.
Great. So I love that you interviewed people and started talking to them about the history, because it is important, even our own families, to talk to our relatives and get the story before they're not there to tell us the story anymore. So it sounds like you've given us a little peek into what the book is about. Is it about this, the history, or is it about more than that?
Well, the thing that I like to start out with saying is it's not about the flora and fauna of the White Clay Creek. There are people who are far better qualified to write that book than I am. It's about how all the factors that had to come together for the White Clay Creek to be created. The right people had to be there with leadership skills. In those days, it was very interesting. The birders, the people who were interested in watching the birds, were in bed with the union people, the UAW, the Chrysler plant workers, did their bonding generation after generation, hunting and fishing along the banks of the White Clay Creek. And when the DuPont company was considering building a dam and a reservoir that would have inundated the White Clay Creek Valley, would have taken away their vacation land and their bonding land. So that was it's sort of something of a class struggle. At the same time, there was no money to purchase land. Right now, we have $10 million of open space acquisition each year set aside by the legislature. And also another 10 million, I believe, for farmland acquisition. But back then there was nothing. The money had to be culled from unused funds elsewhere. And each parcel was its own battle. And these people were at it, year after year after year. And they would call themselves, they would drive around and see a farm for sale and call each other and say, hey, we've got to get that for the park, you see. And that's the way it was done in those days. And we have a great depth. And if it hadn't been for those people, I am 100% sure that that land would now be mega mansions lining the White Clay Creek. And now it's available to the public. And it's been a great source of nourishment and athletics and recreation, especially during this time of COVID when everything else was shut down.
Yeah, we've definitely grown to appreciate our parks even more now in the last 2 years, I would agree. So you mentioned some amazing things already, but tell us some of the amazing things you've learned during the process of writing this history book.
Well, one amazing thing that I have a slide I'd like to show you about it, but that is that in the 20s and 30s, there was a lot of life along the White Clay Creek. There were motorcycle jumps, and these were sponsored by the community. There were prizes. There were people who would take their motorcycle up the various hills at various places around the White Clay Creek and go down the hills, and some of them would even crash through burning barriers, sending splinters into the air. And they would have done this fortified by their hip flasks. And of course, this was during Prohibition, so this was bootleg whiskey, and send splinters flying into the air, and the crowd would not go home. This is crowds of, maybe 3,000 people, according to the old records of the Newark Post. That this was a big event in their lives and in the life of the community. Is this time that I could share the
Sure,
screen?
go ahead. And Jan's going to screen share because she has a bunch of pictures to show us, so you can kind of get a look at the park. Ah, there's the motorcyclers.
Okay, and you can see it was quite a well-developed event. And this guy here, if you can see my cursor, can you, Erica?
Yes,
This is
yes.
Wild Wooly Woolahan, and he was the crowd's favorite, and he was always the last one to go through the burning barriers. And so, it was a very well-developed event. If you can just imagine that happening now. Now, there's another slide here. This is this board wall to be crashed in 1936 at the motorcycle hill climb in Newark, Delaware by Buckingham. Lumber donated by Newark Lumber. I think we all remember Newark Lumber. And so that there were, as it says here, a lot of people from Wilmington came down to observe this. And the White Clay Creek today is so pastoral, you would never, it's hard to imagine that. Okay, I have another slide here. This contour, the dam that had been proposed by the DuPont company would have flooded the area. Here's the arc of the dividing line between Delaware and Pennsylvania. So it went up into Pennsylvania. It was a bi-state effort. And the blue area is what would have been inundated up to the 180-foot contour line. And there were a lot of people who owned farms, gentlemen farmers. A lot of DuPont people, especially in Pennsylvania, owned farms. And of course, they couldn't speak out against the hand that feeds, but their wives were very active in fighting the dam.
It's interesting.
Now, this is a map of, I put together, it started with a map of the White Clay Creek that was put together by a man named Dick Robinson, who sort of grew up along the White Clay Creek and has a lot of anecdotal stories that are just fascinating. But on top of that, you can see here the Borchard Tract, the Krantz Tract, Wells Tract, Marsden. These are the farms, the ancestral farms that so that people could go back, people who were associated with these farms could go back and remember what part of the present White Clay Creek families had been on. Right here is the Whiteman Tract, which used to be a automobile shop and is now where CVS is located on the corner of Paper Mill Road and Corner Catch. So there's a lot of history that people can associate with. Now we get to some slides that are prettier that just sort of show you the beauty of the White Clay Creek. And as I said, I can't wait to get out there right after this because it's been out for far too long. This is a picture of probably the best known spot on the White Clay Creek called David Sat Rock. And you can access this either by parking at Chambers Rock Road parking lot and walking north along the west side, or going up to Pennsylvania parking lot number 2 and walking south along the west side of the creek. This is me in my happy spot near the nature center. And I just feel a sense of peace and relaxation, serenity. I think most people do when they're on the creek. I have a good friend who has really taken up walking in a bigger way than I have. This is the bulwarks for the railroad that went along the White Clay Creek, crossed the river several times. And this is recognizable, and it's approximately at the state line between Pennsylvania and Delaware.
So did I understand correctly? It's accessible from Pennsylvania as well as Delaware. The
Yes,
park
yes.
is. Okay.
There's several different parking places. The best map, there are a lot of different maps, but I think the best map is available from the city of Newark. And I like that particular map because not only has the state park, the White Clay Creek State Park, but also the city of Newark parks and the county parks. So we were blessed with a lot of parks here in northern Delaware, and they're all interconnected. So it's a nice thing. This is a picture of a bench. And I wanted to point out that the Friends of the White Clay Creek State Park have a program where you can purchase a memorial bench for $400 is the price this year. And that's what I plan to do with the first $400 of profits from my book, is to purchase that a memorial bench for the people who saved the park, and also for the African-American community, because they used to have total body immersions in the White Clay Creek. This, I believe, is the picture on the cover of the book. And you can really enjoy any season in the White Clay Creek. Here it is in winter. This is my friend Emily reading the book. And that's me when I first, this is an author copy, and I first, unboxed. You're supposed to take a picture of unboxing your book.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you. I feel
Whoops,
serenity
I've
and
lost audio.
you lost me again. I do hear you. Can
Okay.
you hear me yet?
Yes.
Are we back?
Yes.
So I feel serenity and calm just seeing the pictures of the park. And I think we all know how it feels when we get out in nature and take a walk, and how what a great experience that can be, and how important it is for our mental health, as well as our physical health. So Jan, as we're kind of wrapping it up, what takeaway or maybe encouragement do you have for our listeners?
Well, I'd like to say, if you are interested in more information, I offer periodically a free PowerPoint, and I think Erica's going to put collect information, contact information of people who are interested in that free, PowerPoint, which has a lot more information. And also, I'd like to see you on the trail.
So Jan's heading out right now. So if you head out right now, you might see her there. And as she said, we're going to put a couple things in the comment section. I'm going to make sure you have the link to the evidence on forest bathing and how important that is. I love that that's an evidence-based practice. That's good for us. My evidence is just that I've done it and it has worked. Also, you can email me if you want to get on Jan's email list for more additional information about the park. So, and the creek. So Jan, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you on the trail.
Thank you, Erica. This has been great. I look forward to getting in contact with more people who like the White Clay Creek.